There was a time I felt stuck, tired, mentally scattered. I was chasing time, constantly overwhelmed, never ahead. And then I changed one thing. I started waking up at 5 a.m. At first, it was uncomfortable. It was dark. It was quiet. But it was also mine. That hour, it wasn't about the world. It wasn't about emails, deadlines, or demands. It was about resetting my mind, not just waking up early, but waking up with intention. When you rise at 5 a.m., you're not just beating the sun. You're commanding your life. You're aligning your mind with its natural rhythm. Your brain releases cortisol, not the stress kind, but the alertness kind, the kind that tells your body it's time to win. You step outside and let the sunlight hit your eyes, and something shifts. Your biology begins to work for you, not against you. Dopamine kicks in. You start to feel good, not by chance, not by scrolling, but because your body is now your ally. Then you move. Maybe it's a walk, maybe it's a workout. It doesn't matter. What matters is motion creates emotion. You activate your system. You wire your brain for productivity. You're no longer waiting for motivation. You're building it. And that quiet, that silence at 5 a.m., it becomes sacred. That's where focus lives. That's where clarity lives. That's where why you live, unbothered, undistracted, and unstoppable. In those early hours, I've learned more, created more, achieved more. Not because I had more time, but because I had more ownership of it. And when you take ownership of your morning, you take control of your life. So if you feel lost, anxious, unmotivated, you don't need a miracle. You need a morning, a 5 a.m. morning. Not once, not sometimes, but every single day. The 5 a.m. habit didn't just change how I live. It changed who I am. Wake up early, win your day, and watch how your life begins to rise with the sun. Waking up early, specifically around 5 a.m., is not just a productivity hack or a lifestyle trend. It's a deeply biological alignment with the brain's natural hormonal rhythms. When you wake up at this hour, you are tapping into a built-in system that your body has developed over thousands of years, one designed to optimize focus, clarity, and mental performance. The early morning window is biologically primed to release key neurochemicals, most notably cortisol in its optimal form. While cortisol is often associated with stress, it's important to understand that it's also a vital hormone for alertness and concentration. Around 30 to 45 minutes after waking, the human body experiences what is called the cortisol awakening response, CARE. This is the brain's way of signaling the body that it's time to become alert, active, and aware of the environment. When you consistently wake up at 5 a.m., you are essentially riding this hormonal wave at the ideal time, giving you a natural cognitive edge. Cortisol released during the early hours is not the same as the cortisol released during high stress moments throughout the day. Instead of being reactive and damaging, this early morning cortisol is anticipatory and energizing. It prepares your body for the day ahead. It sharpens attention. It boosts your ability to process information. It improves memory consolidation and enhances your ability to focus deeply. If you miss this window or shift your waking time far past it, say to 8 a.m. or later, you often miss the peak of this natural cortisol response, leading to slower mental starts and a reduced ability to focus intensely in the first part of your day. This is why people who habitually wake later often feel groggy, sluggish, or mentally off, even after adequate sleep. Their internal biological systems are not syncing with external cues. When you wake up at 5 a.m. and expose yourself to light, ideally natural sunlight, you signal to the brain's internal master clock, located in the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus, that it's time to start the day. This process helps reinforce the 24-hour circadian rhythm that governs nearly all aspects of your physiology, mood, appetite, hormone release, and even body temperature. Light at this early hour sends a strong cue that sets your rhythm for the next 24 hours. It also tells your pineal gland to suppress melatonin, the hormone responsible for sleepiness. This rapid suppression of melatonin allows for faster waking and heightened alertness, all without needing caffeine. The earlier you align with these natural rhythms, the more your brain rewards you with neurochemical advantages. In addition to cortisol, the early morning also sees the rise of dopamine, the motivation and reward neurotransmitter. Dopamine in the morning doesn't just make you feel good. It makes you more likely to pursue goals, to stick with challenging tasks, and to stay focused on what matters. When dopamine is elevated in conjunction with early cortisol, the brain enters a high performance state. This is not accidental. It's a pattern that the human body evolved in natural environments where early rising meant survival, attention to surroundings, and mental readiness. We are biologically hardwired to be mentally sharp in the early hours. Ignoring this is like swimming upstream against our own design. Furthermore, this period is marked by a lower presence of distractions, which creates an optimal external environment to match the internal clarity. The The silence, the stillness, the lack of incoming information, it all works synergistically with your internal brain state to produce laser-like focus. It's no surprise that some of the world's most prolific thinkers, creators, and leaders attribute their deepest, most impactful work to the early morning hours. It's not because of some magical inspiration, but because their physiology is giving them the fuel they need. Neurochemical, hormonal, and cognitive fuel that is not as readily available at other times of day. There is also a strong connection between early rising and mental health. By aligning with natural cortisol and dopamine rhythms, individuals tend to feel more balanced emotionally. They experience fewer mood swings, lower levels of anxiety, and higher levels of emotional control. This is because the same neurochemicals responsible for focus also regulate mood and emotional response. A brain in rhythm is a brain that's more resilient to stress, more open to positive experiences, and more capable of navigating challenges with clarity. It's important to note that this alignment doesn't happen instantly. The body and brain operate best on consistency. Waking up at 5 a.m. once or twice will not produce all these benefits. But doing it regularly, ideally for 30 days or more, will create a shift in your neurobiology. Your body begins to anticipate the wake-up time. Your hormonal cycles adjust. You no longer force yourself to get up early. You naturally start waking up just before your alarm with a sense of readiness. This state of neural readiness is what creates lasting change in habits, performance, and mindset. The 5 a.m. habit is not about sacrificing sleep. It's about optimizing your wake window. That means going to bed earlier and protecting your sleep hygiene so that you still get 78 hours of quality rest. When you do this, waking up early doesn't feel like deprivation. It feels like expansion. You gain access to a part of your mind that's normally buried under the noise of the day. You give yourself a head start, not just physically, but cognitively and emotionally. In today's world, where attention is scattered and stress is high, the ability to enter a focused, calm, and powerful state each morning is a competitive advantage. It's a foundation for learning faster, working smarter, and making better decisions. And it begins with understanding and aligning with your brain's biology. The 5 a.m. habit isn't just a morning routine, it's a neurological upgrade. One decision made consistently that brings your body, brain, and life into alignment. When you wake up early with purpose, you're not just rising with the sun. You're rising with science on your side. When you wake up early and expose yourself to morning sunlight, you're doing more than just enjoying a peaceful moment. You're engaging one of the most powerful biological resets available to the human body. The early rays of the sun interact directly with specialized cells in your eyes called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. These cells are not used for vision. Instead, their role is to detect sunlight, specifically blue light, and send a signal to your brain's master clock known as the suprachiasmatic nucleus located in the hypothalamus. This signal starts a cascade of physiological and neurological changes that impact your energy, mood, hormone levels, and even your long-term health. The master clock controls your circadian rhythm, a roughly 24-hour internal cycle that dictates when you feel alert, when you feel sleepy, when your body releases hormones, and when your brain performs at its best. Exposing your eyes to natural sunlight shortly after waking reinforces the circadian clock. It tells your brain it's morning. Set everything in motion. This synchronization of the circadian rhythm not only improves sleep at night, but also ensures that your energy and focus are optimally distributed throughout the day. Without this anchor, your internal rhythms drift, making it harder to fall asleep at the right time, harder to wake up, and harder to stay mentally sharp during the day. But beyond just setting your internal clock, morning sunlight plays another crucial role. It boosts your dopamine levels. Dopamine is often misunderstood as merely a feel-good chemical. While it is involved in pleasure and reward, it is much more accurately described as the motivation molecule. It drives you to pursue goals, fuels focus, builds persistence, and reinforces habits. Low dopamine levels are associated with low drive, low energy, depression, and an inability to experience deep satisfaction. Natural sunlight, particularly in the early hours of the day, is one of the most powerful and accessible ways to increase dopamine in a healthy, sustainable way. Here's how it works when sunlight enters your eyes. It triggers a biochemical chain reaction that activates the release of dopamine from a region of the brain called the retina and communicates with brain areas responsible for wakefulness and mood. This release doesn't just make you feel good in the moment. It primes your brain to stay focused, productive, and engaged throughout the day. It also creates a positive feedback loop. You begin associating mornings with clarity, energy, and progress. Over time, this trains your mind to wake up with intention because it knows something rewarding is coming. And unlike dopamine spikes from caffeine, sugar, or social media, the kind created by morning light is stable, natural, and deeply beneficial to your long-term mental health. When you make it a daily habit to step outside within the first 30 to 60 minutes of waking, you're building a neurochemical foundation for a sharper mind and a more resilient body. It only takes 5 to 10 minutes of morning sunlight exposure, more if the sky is overcast, for the brain to lock in its circadian rhythm and begin its dopamine production. This small habit becomes a massive lever for improving every area of your life. Your sleep improves because melatonin, the hormone that induces sleepiness, is now being suppressed at the right time in the morning, which means it will rise at the correct time in the evening. Your mood improves because you're feeding your brain the light it needs to regulate emotions. Your energy improves because the circadian system controls when cortisol and adrenaline rise, key hormones for attention and readiness. And your motivation improves because dopamine begins your day on an upward curve rather than a reactive one. Without morning sunlight, all of these systems begin to drift out of sync. Artificial indoor light lacks the intensity and spectrum of sunlight. Even the brightest indoor lights are only a fraction as powerful as natural sunlight in signaling your circadian system. This is why people who stay indoors in the morning, especially in front of screens, often feel tired despite being awake for hours. Their bodies don't know it's daytime. Their brains are not receiving the signal to start the engine. As a result, dopamine stays low, melatonin suppression is weak, and the brain operates in a fog. Another fascinating benefit of morning sunlight is its effect on body temperature. When you get sunlight early in the day, your brain sets a timer. Roughly 14 to 16 hours later, it will begin lowering your core body temperature, which is one of the essential triggers for falling asleep. So, morning sunlight not only wakes you up better, but also helps you fall asleep faster and deeper at night. It creates a beautiful loop. Get light early, car, feel energized now, sleep better later, gar, wake up refreshed tomorrow. The connection between light, dopamine, and the circadian rhythm also plays a role in long-term cognitive function. Studies have shown that people who consistently get natural light in the morning are less likely to experience depression, cognitive decline, and metabolic disorders. Their brain's neuroplasticity, the ability to learn and adapt, remains sharper. Their emotional resilience is higher. They are less reactive to stress, more focused on meaningful goals, and more consistent in their habits. In a world full of complex health strategies and high-cost wellness plans, morning sunlight remains one of the most powerful and most overlooked habits for total brain-body alignment. This isn't just about getting up early for the sake of discipline. It's about respecting the biology that governs how your brain operates. We are not designed to live under fluorescent lights and blue screens all day. We are designed to rise with the sun. Light is not just for sight, it is information for your brain. It tells your body when to be awake, when to eat, when to rest, and when to release hormones that regulate everything from memory to metabolism. Morning sunlight is the master key to activating this system. In short, by stepping into the sunlight early in the day, you're not just seeing the morning, you're informing your brain that it's time to lead, focus, and move forward. It's a small shift in behavior with massive ripple effects. It builds a foundation for a sharper mind, a stronger body, and a more intentional life. When the world is still and the light is gentle, your brain is ready to receive its most important signal of the day. And when that signal is received, everything starts working, not against you, but for you. One of the most underestimated yet powerful tools for transforming your brain and body in the morning is deliberate movement. This doesn't mean an intense workout or exhausting routine. It means intentional physical activity, even for a short period, that signals your nervous system that it's time to turn on. When you begin your day with movement, your brain and body respond with a surge of biochemical and neurological energy that primes you for mental clarity, emotional stability, and elevated performance throughout the day. From the moment you rise, your brain is in a transition phase. It moves from a state of rest and repair to a state of action and focus. What you do in that first hour can significantly influence how well your brain functions over the next 10 to 12 hours. Movement is one of the most effective ways to shift your system into a high-functioning mode. When you engage in light physical activity shortly after waking, walking, stretching, yoga, or even body weight exercises, your body begins to release a cascade of chemicals such as adrenaline, noradrenaline, and dopamine. These chemicals are not just about energy. They increase alertness, sharpen your attention, and enhance your brain's readiness to absorb information and respond to challenges. Neurologically, deliberate movement activates what is known as the sympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for energy, focus, and goal-oriented behavior. but because it's early in the day, and if movement is done gently and intentionally, it does so without triggering stress. It gives you a controlled and healthy spike in mental energy without tipping your system into anxiety or overstimulation. This subtle but powerful activation helps you transition out of sleep inertia, the lingering grogginess many people experience upon waking, and replaces it with clarity and alertness. At a deeper level, movement affects the brain's plasticity, the ability to change, grow, and learn. One of the most fascinating effects of morning exercise is the upregulation of brain-derived neurotrophic factors BDNF, a protein that acts like fertilizer for the brain. BDNF supports the survival of existing neurons and encourages the growth of new ones. It enhances synaptic plasticity, which means your brain's ability to create and strengthen connections between thoughts, ideas, and memories. Simply put, morning movement makes your brain more adaptable and better prepared to learn, remember, and create. In addition, physical activity in the morning has been shown to increase blood flow to the brain, delivering more oxygen and nutrients exactly when the brain is ramping up its activity. This increase in circulation leads to sharper thinking and quicker decision-making. People who move early in the day often report feeling more in control, more productive, and more emotionally balanced, because their brain is quite literally running on better fuel. There is also a strong link between early movement and emotional regulation. The chemical changes triggered by movement aren't just about energy. They also improve mood and reduce anxiety. Morning activity helps regulate cortisol, ensuring that its release stays within the optimal range. It also promotes the production of endorphins, which act as natural mood elevators. This makes you more emotionally stable and less reactive throughout the day. Instead of being easily thrown off by stress, you begin your day in a proactive state with your nervous system already anchored in balance. It's important to note that this movement doesn't need to be long or intense to be effective. Even a 5 to 10 minute brisk walk, some mobility drills, or breath-coordinated stretching can create these neurological benefits. The key is consistency and intentionality. When your body learns to associate movement with the start of the day, it begins to pre-activate the necessary systems even before you begin. Your motor neurons prepare, your heart rate adjusts, your focus sharpens, you've trained your brain to anticipate productivity. This habit also impacts long-term motivation. By beginning your day with action, you reinforce an identity of discipline and intentional living. Psychologically, the act of doing something physical first thing in the morning serves as a keystone habit, one that builds momentum and makes other positive behaviors easier to follow. When you move early, you're more likely to eat well, stay focused, complete difficult tasks, and stick to your goals. This is because movement builds what psychologists call self-efficacy, the belief that you can influence your own outcomes. That belief, reinforced daily, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. There's also an important connection between movement and light exposure. If you take your movement outdoors, even better. Exercising outside in the early morning not only gives you the neurological benefits of movement, but also maximizes your exposure to natural sunlight. This combination has been shown to be one of the most powerful ways to reduce depression, regulate sleep, and enhance daytime focus. The synergy between light and motion amplifies your biological readiness to engage with the world. In today's modern lifestyle, most people go from bed to screens within minutes. They skip the essential step of priming the body and brain for the demands of the day. This creates a disconnect. The mind is flooded with information, but the body is still in rest mode. This imbalance leads to low energy, poor focus, and emotional volatility. Morning movement repairs that disconnect. It brings your entire system into harmony. You start the day unified in mind, body, and purpose. Over time, this simple habit transforms your baseline state. You no longer need to rely on external stimulants to feel awake. Your body becomes your natural source of energy. You wake up with clarity. You feel a sense of momentum. You begin to trust your ability to create action and shift your own state. And perhaps most importantly, you take control of your mornings, which often determines the trajectory of your entire day. This is not about perfection. It's about consistent, deliberate engagement with your biology. It's about saying, before I take on the world, I'm going to activate myself. I'm going to give my brain what it needs to focus, to learn, to lead. The benefits of this one act ripple out through every domain of your life, mental, emotional, physical, and even spiritual. It all starts with a simple decision to move. Even on the days you don't feel like it, even on the days when it's hard to get out of bed, movement becomes your medicine. It becomes your signal to the brain that no matter how you feel, you are in charge. And in that moment, everything shifts. Waking up early isn't just about productivity or fitting more into your day. It aligns your body with powerful biological rhythms that are wired into your system. One of the most critical hormones involved in this process is cortisol. While often misunderstood and misrepresented as a purely stress hormone, cortisol, when released at the right time and in the right amount, is a vital tool for energy, clarity, and health. The key is not just having cortisol, but having it peak early in the day, as nature intended. When you wake up early, especially around or before sunrise, you harness this natural cortisol rhythm to your advantage. Cortisol follows a circadian rhythm. In healthy individuals, it rises rapidly within the first 30 to 45 minutes after waking, reaching its peak in the morning. This is known as the cortisol awakening response, CARE. This spike is not something to avoid. It is designed by nature to help you feel alert, focused, and physically energized. It increases blood sugar slightly to prepare you for activity, enhances your attention, sharpens memory recall, and mobilizes stored energy so that you're ready to move, act, and think clearly. It's your body's way of saying, the day has begun. Let's go. When you wake up late or in a misaligned pattern, especially without exposure to natural light, this cortisol response becomes blunted. That means you don't get the proper surge of mental and physical energy. Your alertness is delayed. You may feel foggy or groggy for longer. You might find yourself relying on caffeine or stimulants just to feel normal. Over time, this misalignment not only affects your energy and mood, but also leads to metabolic issues, poor immune function, and weight gain. That's because cortisol, when misstimed or chronically elevated due to stress, starts behaving abnormally, causing damage instead of optimization. However, when you consistently wake up early, especially in coordination with sunlight exposure and light physical movement, you reinforce the healthy cortisol spike. Your system becomes trained to expect that rise, and this rhythm becomes stronger. This pattern helps your adrenal glands function properly and keeps your body in a state of readiness rather than reactivity. A strong morning cortisol peak also sets a reliable schedule for the rest of your hormonal systems, including melatonin, insulin, and thyroid hormones, all of which are critical for energy, mood, and metabolism. What's particularly fascinating is how this early cortisol rhythm directly supports fat burning. Cortisol promotes a process called lipolysis, which is the breakdown of stored fat into usable energy. In the early morning, when glycogen stores are still relatively low after an overnight fast, your body is more likely to tap into fat as a fuel source, especially if you pair that early wake up with some light physical activity and wait a little while before eating. This doesn't require a long workout or fasting all day. It's about using your biology intelligently. By sensing your wake uptime with the natural cortisol peak, your body becomes more metabolically flexible, meaning it can switch between burning carbs and fat more efficiently. Furthermore, an early cortisol surge supports cognitive function throughout the day. It primes your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for focus, decision-making, and self-control. That's why people who rise early without the aid of artificial stimulants often report feeling sharper, more present, and more intentional in their actions. They're not just awake, they're switched on. Their brains are riding a natural biochemical wave that supports productivity, creativity, and resilience. And here's something that makes this even more powerful. The early cortisol rise works best when it happens in alignment with sunlight. When sunlight hits your eyes early in the morning, it sends a signal to the brain's master clock in the hypothalamus. That clock then sends messages to your adrenal glands to release cortisol. This system evolved over thousands of years, long before we had artificial light or alarm clocks. It's deeply ingrained in your physiology. When you follow this natural cycle, wake early, get light, move your body, you're not forcing yourself into a schedule. You're stepping into a rhythm that your body already understands. In contrast, late risers often miss this natural cortisol window. If you wake up too late, your cortisol release is out of sync with your light exposure, and your system becomes confused. Instead of getting a clean, timed burst in the morning, cortisol might linger or spike later in the day, leading to anxiety, fatigue, or trouble sleeping at night. This disruption affects everything from blood sugar regulation to fat storage, to your ability to stay calm and focused under pressure. Over time, this misalignment contributes to burnout, mood instability, and metabolic issues. That's why restoring this morning rhythm isn't just about how you feel in the short term. It's about protecting your long-term health. This early hormonal alignment also improves your sleep. When cortisol rises sharply in the morning, it sends a strong signal to your brain that it's daytime. Roughly 14 to 16 hours later, that same rhythm supports the rise of melatonin, the hormone that prepares you for sleep. This creates a powerful loop: wake up early, get sunlight, activate your cortisol, and by nightfall, your body knows it's time to wind down. Your sleep becomes deeper, more restorative, and more regular. And with better sleep comes even stronger morning energy the next day. This is a compounding loop that builds energy, discipline, and mental strength over time. The psychological impact of this is also significant. When you wake up early and feel the effects of your body working with you, not against you, it builds confidence. You begin to trust your energy levels. You don't need to hype yourself up to do difficult things because your biology is already on your side. The early hours become a sacred time, a window when your mind is calm, your body is active, and your goals are within reach. This is the time when most people are still sleeping, and by simply showing up for yourself in those hours, you've already created momentum before the world even begins. Waking up early isn't about punishment or perfection. It's about tapping into a natural system of power that's already built into you. Cortisol isn't your enemy. When aligned with your circadian rhythm, it becomes one of your greatest allies for alertness, fat burning, mental clarity, and emotional resilience. It's a natural signal from your body that you were made to rise early, lead your life intentionally, and move forward with strength. There's a certain kind of silence that exists only in the early morning. A quiet so complete, so unpolluted by the noise of the world, that it creates the perfect space for inner alignment. This stillness is not simply the absence of sound, it is the absence of demand. Before the world begins to pull you in every direction, before the emails, the notifications, the deadlines, and the opinions, there is a window of time where your mind can operate in its purest form. Clear, undistracted, and deeply intentional. This is one of the greatest advantages of waking up early. It gives you uninterrupted access to your own mind. In the early hours, your cognitive resources are still fresh. You haven't yet been influenced by the external world, and that makes it the ideal time for activities that require deep focus, creative problem solving, or self-reflection. Scientific research confirms that the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for focus, planning, and self-control, is at its strongest when you're well rested and undistracted. This means the morning is neurologically primed for tasks that demand your full attention and strategic thinking. When you reserve these hours for deliberate thought, journaling, learning, or meaningful work, you maximize your brain's capacity for clarity and performance. But beyond productivity, the stillness of the morning has a profound emotional and spiritual effect. In a world that is constantly racing forward, filled with digital noise and emotional volatility, the morning gives you the rare opportunity to slow down and simply be. Gratitude becomes more accessible in these quiet moments. When the world hasn't yet pressed its chaos onto your shoulders, your heart is more open to noticing the small blessing. The breath in your lungs, the warmth in your room, the chance to begin again. This state of awareness isn't something that needs to be forced. It emerges naturally when your mind is clear and your surroundings are still. Gratitude, when practiced consistently, reshapes the way your brain interprets life. It activates brain regions associated with empathy and self-awareness while suppressing activity in areas linked to fear and anxiety. Morning is the most fertile ground for this mindset to grow. A simple practice, writing down 3 things you're grateful for, reflecting on a positive memory, or mentally acknowledging what you appreciate about your current life, can have a measurable impact on your mood and behavior throughout the day. It shifts your mental lens from scarcity to abundance, from stress to peace. This practice also builds intentionality. In the early morning, when distractions are minimal, you're able to ask yourself, what kind of day do I want to create? What kind of person do I want to be today? Instead of being reactive to whatever happens, you set your course proactively. You are no longer operating on autopilot. You're choosing your mindset, your direction, your priorities. This is how you gain true control over your life. Not by controlling external circumstances, but by mastering your internal responses to them. Intentionality is not a vague concept, it's a cognitive skill. The more you practice making conscious choices in the morning, the stronger your ability becomes to override impulsive reactions later in the day. Early morning routines that involve reflection, goal setting, or even just 5 minutes of mindful breathing improve your executive function, which is the mental system that governs decision-making, emotional regulation, and focus. This isn't about perfection, it's about giving yourself a calm, conscious start that makes you more resilient when things inevitably get noisy and challenging later on. Another layer to this is emotional regulation. The peacefulness of the morning can become a tool for managing your mood. Many people wake up feeling anxious, overwhelmed by the day ahead. But instead of rushing into the chaos, pausing in the stillness allows you to reframe your mental state. Breathwork, light movement, or even just drinking water slowly and consciously can reset your nervous system. This shift in energy creates a buffer that protects your mind from being hijacked by negative patterns. You become less reactive, more measured, and better equipped to handle challenges. There is also a deeper psychological principle at play at honoring yourself. By waking up early and giving yourself those quiet moments, you are sending a message to your brain that your time matters, your thoughts matter, and your peace matters. You are putting yourself first, not out of selfishness, but out of self-respect. This builds self-trust and integrity. When you say, I will wake up early for myself, and you follow through, your confidence grows, not because of external validation, but because you're keeping promises to yourself. That builds a strong, grounded identity. The stillness of the morning becomes a mirror. It reflects back to you what's really going on inside your fears, your hopes, your clarity, your confusion. And because there's no noise, no pressure, you can actually see it. You can work with it. You can change it. In the rush of the day, we often don't have time to listen to our inner voice. But in the morning, it speaks the loudest. This is where breakthroughs happen, not necessarily through force, but through awareness. In this quiet space, ideas are born, insights emerge, problems begin to unravel. You get clarity not by thinking harder, but by allowing the mind to breathe. This is why many of the world's most effective thinkers, creators, and leaders build their day around the early morning. It's not about hustle, it's about depth. They use this time to align with their purpose before the world demands their attention. And perhaps most powerfully, the stillness of the morning reconnects you to presence. There is something almost sacred about watching the sun rise, hearing the world slowly come to life, and knowing that you have this brief, uninterrupted moment to just exist, not to perform, not to impress, not to compete, just to be. And in that being, you find power. Because when you are present fully and authentically, you are at your most resourceful, your most creative, and your most alive. So waking up early isn't just a habit, it's a ritual of clarity. It's a daily return to self. In the silence of the morning, you build the mental, emotional, and spiritual foundation for everything else that follows. You don't chase the day, you lead it. Not because you have more time, but because you have more focus, more gratitude, and more intentionality. There's something profoundly transformative about doing the same thing every day, especially when that thing is difficult, uncomfortable, or uncommon. Waking up early is one such act. It seems simple on the surface, but the discipline it requires and the mindset it cultivates go far beyond the morning hours. When you consistently wake up early, not once, not occasionally, but every single day, you are training your mind in ways that impact every area of your life. You are building something deeper than a routine. You are constructing a foundation of mental resilience, discipline, and self-leadership that compounds with time. The act of waking up early, especially before you feel like it, forces a decision between comfort and growth. Every morning, when the alarm rings and your body wants just a few more minutes, you are presented with a choice. Do you choose short-term ease or long-term strength? When you get out of bed anyway, even when you don't feel motivated, you send a powerful message to your subconscious. I do what I say I will do. This repetition creates identity. You stop being someone who tries and start being someone who follows through. That shift changes how you approach everything else. Goals, habits, relationships, and challenges. Resilience isn't just about withstanding big storms. It's forged in the small, quiet moments of doing what's hard when no one is watching. Waking up early is often done in solitude. There's no audience, no applause, no immediate reward. But this is precisely what makes it so powerful. It removes the need for external motivation and forces you to rely on internal discipline. When you learn to act without needing validation or motivation, you become unshakable. You gain the ability to keep showing up, especially when it's hard. And that kind of mental toughness doesn't just help in the mornings. It becomes a way of life. Discipline is often misunderstood as punishment or restriction. But in reality, discipline is freedom. When you build the habit of waking up early, you begin to control your time rather than letting time control you. You stop being reactive to the day and start being proactive. You don't scramble to catch up, you move with purpose. And over time, this ability to lead yourself gives you an enormous advantage. While others are negotiating with themselves, procrastinating, or waiting for the right mood, you've already started. You've already taken action. This consistency builds momentum, and momentum builds confidence. There's also a psychological principle known as identity reinforcement. Every time you perform an action, especially one that requires effort, your brain reinforces the belief, this is who I am. So each early wake up becomes a vote for the type of person you want to be: disciplined, focused, intentional. It creates a feedback loop. The more consistent you are, the more solid your identity becomes. And when your identity aligns with your goals, you stop relying on willpower alone. You don't have to fight yourself every day, you simply act according to who you believe you are. Consistency also creates compounding returns. Much like investing, small, repeated actions produce outsized results over time. The first few mornings may not feel transformational. You might still feel tired, you might not see immediate gains. But after a week, then a month, then a year, your mindset, your habits, your energy levels, your productivity, they all begin to elevate. And not just by a small margin, the gains begin to stack. You're not just waking up earlier, you're thinking clearer, planning smarter, executing better. And because you're doing it every day, these gains are multiplied again and again. This compounding applies to emotional resilience as well. Life is unpredictable. You will face setbacks, stress, and uncertainty. But when you've trained yourself to do something difficult every day, you build the mental muscle to face challenges head on. You become less reactive and more composed. You've already proven to yourself that you can act despite discomfort. So when pressure rises, when things get chaotic, you don't fall apart, you rise to meet it. That's the hidden benefit of consistent early rising. It's not just about starting your day early. It's about becoming the kind of person who shows up regardless of how you feel. In a world where so many people are driven by emotion, mood, or external circumstances, consistency becomes a superpower. Most people are inconsistent with their goals because they are waiting to feel ready. But feelings are unreliable. If your success depends on feeling motivated every day, you'll fail as soon as your mood changes. But if you train yourself to act, whether you feel like it or not, you become unstoppable. Early rising teaches you this principle every single morning. Don't wait, act, don't negotiate, commit. And that discipline carries over into every decision you make. There's also a deep sense of self-respect that grows from consistency. When you keep promises to yourself, even small ones like getting up on time, you begin to rebuild the trust you may have lost with yourself over the years. So many people set goals and don't follow through, and over time, their confidence erodes. They stop believing in their own word. But every time you wake up early, every time you push through the resistance, you restore that trust. You prove to yourself, I am reliable, I am consistent. I do what I say I will do. And that belief becomes a rock you can build your entire life on. None of this happens overnight. Discipline isn't built in a day, it's built day by day. Some mornings will be harder than others. Some days you will stumble. That's part of the process. But if you keep coming back, if you keep choosing to rise early and show up for yourself, the long-term effect is undeniable. You become more focused, more resilient, more effective, not just in the morning, but in everything you do. It's not just about the hour you wake up. It's about the standard you choose to hold yourself to. And when that standard becomes a part of who you are, success is no longer a question of chance. It's a matter of consistency.